You know, I hate to say I told you so. What am I talking about? I love to say I told you so because less than 48 hours after the conclusion of the UN Conference on Migration, the usual suspects are already pointing to this allegedly non-binding compact as the basis for allowing yet more irregular immigrants into Canada. Wow, that was quite the commentary in the Globe and Mail by former Liberal Cabinet Minister Lloyd Axworthy, who dates back to the days of Prime Minister Trudeau I. You see, the UN conference in Marrakesh had barely wrapped, and there was Axworthy, the current chair of the World Refugee Council, already making an impassioned plea for Canada to allow the people who comprise the Central American migrant caravan to immigrate into our Great Dominion. The caravan, which we followed in southern Mexico for 5 days straight last month, has figuratively and literally hit a wall in Tijuana as these migrants are rightfully not being allowed onto U.S. soil. Incredibly, there is a process involved in migrating into a sovereign nation. Maybe they didn't get that memo. Yet here's what Mr. Axworthy states in his Globe column, quote, "Those volunteering in the Tijuana refugee camps reported that there is a significant number of single women and children in the caravan, and the overt discrimination against them is a source of personal trauma for those denied any alternative," end quote. Well, hate to be a crank here, folks, but it would have been quite jolly if Axworthy actually offered a definition for significant number. Would that be 13 or 1,300 migrants who are women and children? And I can tell you that when the caravan numbered about 5,000 migrants early last month in southern Mexico, about 10% were women and children. The other 90% were young, able-bodied males. Then again, maybe Axworthy is getting his talking points from the CBC. You might recall that last month the CBC, citing the UN as its source, reported that about 2,300 members of the caravan, or almost 50%, were women and children. I know there's about 2 weeks to go before the end of the year, but that whopper might just be the biggest fake news item of all of 2018. Yet Axworthy is all in nevertheless. He writes, quote, "Here's the rationale. Canada has set out that the treatment of women and girls is a priority of our international policy. One of the key findings of the World Refugee Council report, to be released in the new year, is the extent of discrimination against women in refugee situations. Here is a clear opportunity to act against such bias," end quote. In other words, this is precisely the sort of narrative our feminist Prime Minister loves to embrace. And hey, why not? The more women allowed into Canada, the more groping opportunities abound, I guess. And then Axworthy doubles down on Canada's alleged obligations to the migrants of the world. Quote, "The Minister of Immigration has rightly asserted that Canada will sign on to the UN compacts on migration and refugees, and that they are important foundations for a renewed commitment by members of the international community to a fair, effective, and just system to handle the growing numbers of people displaced by the pernicious actions of others," end quote. Well, I would argue that the so-called tail of the tape is right there in that statement, folks, that according to Axworthy's interpretation, the UN Compact on Migration means Canada has certain obligations to live up to, which is fascinating because we've been told ad nauseum that the compact is non-binding. And that's the rub, isn't it? The UN Compact doesn't have to be binding when it comes to virtue signaling leaders such as the Trudeaus and the Merkels and the Macrons of the world, those who are already champing at the bit when it comes to resettling the world's 258 million migrants. In other words, the compact doesn't have to be binding for those who are compact friendly and can't wait to use it for a foundation for their domestic immigration policy. And now we have a liberal dinosaur from yesterdecade writing in a government-approved media outlet that A, the more migrants the merrier, and B, Canada is kind of obligated to resettle them. Like I said, Told you so. For the Rebel.media, I'm David the Menzoid Menzies. Hey folks, to catch all my reports on the UN Migrant Conference that took place in Marrakesh, please go to rebelun.com. That's rebelun.com.